The female lead tells women's stories. Remarkable, diverse, inspiring. An educational charity promoting positive female role models who show the many different routes to success and fulfillment.
So often I hear people saying, oh, how do I get started? How do I do this? How do you do it? You just start. You have to begin. And it won't be perfect, and it'll be messy, and it'll be hard. But you're doing something, and you're on your way.
Empowering future generations of women through films and a book of 60 women donated to 18,000 schools in the UK and USA, reaching millions of young people. And through our female lead societies, we help girls to discover new role models that speak to their passions, ambitions and careers. Through our research into social media and mental health, we found a solution to the negative impact of social media on teen girls. Through a simple intervention which encouraged girls to follow different influencers, we were able to change their entire social media experience and sense of well-being. We called this campaign Disrupt Your Feed, and it reached 20 million people on social, with 330 million impressions all over the globe. So what's next? As well as inspiring girls, we're now finding ways to measurably improve the lives of older women through data, research, and the stories of those who have overcome challenges and found their own personal versions of success. We're a long way from being finished. Join us in our mission.
Are we going to talk about women's rights again? Yes, we're going to talk about it until there's balance.
Hey, welcome everyone to the Female Lead Live. We are going to be talking with Sonya Barlow, and she is going to tell us how to create a more inclusive culture. So I hope all of you out there, as you join, are thinking about the questions, perhaps the challenging questions or questions you've faced yourself, that we can ask Sonya towards the end of the discussion. So I'm going to say a few words of introduction, and then I get to ask you some questions first, Sonya. So let me first introduce myself. I'm Edwina Dunn. I'm the founder of the Female Lead. It's a charity that showcases amazing and diverse women who shape the world around us today. So I'm always excited to see how many women sign in from all over the world and are part of our wonderful conversation. To set the context of this conversation, diversity and inclusion seems to be a very hot topic at the moment. And every company is now investing effort and pledging support. So it's a great time to talk. We're going to find out a whole series of things that I think we can do to learn how to address inclusion and a more inclusive culture together. And those are some of the things we're going to look at. A few words about Sonya first. Sonya is an award-winning entrepreneur. She's a TEDx speaker. She runs her own podcast, but she's also an independent diversity consultant and soon to be author, I believe. We can talk about that. In 2020, she was named winner of the most influential woman in tech and a software change maker. and also top 50 BAME entrepreneurs under 50, although we'll come to what you think about that in a little while. Sonya has her own company, and I'm just going to quote a couple of bits of research that I think you found, which is 85% of those asked about inclusion and diversity weren't actually sure what intersectionality means. 65% didn't know which biases they had themselves, and 40% felt that their company was delivering the training on all of this to simply tick a box. So quite a challenging section of issues that need to be addressed. So we're going to have a look at what we can all do to help champion and understand unconscious bias, inclusive cultures, and championing the cause. So, Sonya, after that rather long introduction, forgive me, I have some questions for you.
Yes, please, and thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's extremely humbling knowing, 5 years ago I worked for a company that you founded, and today we're having a discussion. I think for me it's a very exciting experience that, kind of smaller, littler Sonya didn't think she'd ever get to. Younger Sonya even.
Well, you're a couple of generations away from me, Sonya, but, I couldn't be more proud or excited from the fact that you trod in a couple of my footsteps, but now you're doing something so brave and bold. So well done to you. That's so impressive. Now, please talk to me about why diversity and inclusion is so important.
Yeah, thank you for raising that question. I mean, fundamentally, it's important because it allows us to feel like we belong, which, according to Maslow's hierarchy, which I'm sure many of us have learned in school and through education, is one of our basic needs as humans, is the feeling to belong and feel like we are really a part of something bigger. But most importantly, if we were to think of it and divide it into two perspectives, one is the business perspective, one is the individual, diverse and inclusive environments and businesses can increase their profits, they can increase their profitability, they can increase their productivity by anywhere between 23 to 33%. So you normally start a business because you want to make money. If you would really want to make money, then you really do want to very much embrace, acknowledge, and venture out into diverse and inclusive cultures. And then from a personnel perspective, you want to wake up every day happy to work for the company you work for. You want to give them your 100%. You want to feel motivated. If you don't feel like you belong and you don't feel like the culture is inclusive, you are going to go in a false pretense. And at some point, you're going to start resenting them, and you're not really going to be productive in the company or for yourself.
So do you think that people... So, the arguments for seem very compelling. They're better businesses, everyone's happier, everybody makes more money. So something must go wrong between this objective and what actually happens. Can you give us some examples of where you've seen things go wrong and why it creates such discomfort or such alienation?
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So I personally have felt like I've been excluded or I haven't belonged in many of the businesses I've worked for. Small examples that I can give you is I worked for a company where a senior stakeholder got my name wrong for 6 weeks. Now, how you get Sonya wrong, I'm only going to let you imagine. But if you can get my name wrong, which is a very basic westernized name, and I wake up, after 4 weeks of going to work thinking, wow, I don't even belong here. And these people don't respect me. And I don't even think they acknowledge my identity. You're not really going to work there. So to answer one of your questions, it's because most of the time, middle management and senior leadership just aren't trying. And they're not educating themselves and learning. The second point is, and again, have been in the scenario, is because businesses are still prioritizing conferences and white papers and research projects over putting budget behind diversity inclusion consultants and really implementing a strategic change just like any fundamental change in the business, diversity inclusion is not something you tick a box. It's systematic, it's strategic, and it should be done over a longer period of time. So as you mentioned in the beginning, I started conducting research on this topic a few months ago, and I've had hundreds of those who have delivered their views, and 40% of those who have gotten involved in the survey feel that their company is just ticking a box, which is not all right. And lastly, it's very much because there isn't a sense of community. There's an idea that you go to work to help someone earn money, gain money, and you kind of walk away. But when you are working with individuals for, let's say, 40 hours a week, you want to have some friendship. You want to feel like you belong. One of the reasons why I created the LMF network, which is an inclusive organization, is because when I moved from my first to my second job role, I didn't really have any friends. And I didn't feel like I had a sense of community. And then I walked into the world of tech, not only as a woman, but a woman of color, not knowing these labels existed. But when I walked in, a lot of it was stereotypes as, well, you can't be in tech if you're not technical. If you are great at communication, but you're not able to code, you're not really going to progress. And I didn't necessarily have a community who I could talk to about career progression and promotion, negotiation skills, or just how to manage these difficult conversations. And fundamentally, that's 3 reasons why, like you've said, there's all of this, a conversation around diversity, inclusion. Companies are building job roles, they're commissioning businesses, but then they kind of do what they think they have to do, and then it just dies down. And it's a phase that we've seen come full circle. It's not like it's the first time, or 2020 was the year that everybody became woke. Actually, diversity inclusion has been on the agenda for a few years now, but it tends to have its peak and troughs.
Mm. And I guess what you said there is quite interesting about, when you feel uncomfortable, when there's a situation that, you do feel alienated, you want to be able to identify someone that you can have a good conversation with,
Mm-hmm.
Where you can say, am I misreading something? Have I not understood the ground rules? Is that part of your thinking and approach?
Yeah, exactly. The stats don't lie. If we talk about the tech industry itself, women make up, let's say at this point, 13 to 15% of the industry. That's still a large percentage that goes to men, or those who identify as man. And then you think about the world of business. Again, a lot of businesses are run by those who don't identify as women, or kind of gender fluid or non-binary. So the point being that if we're entering these spaces where no one really looks or feels like us, or they haven't been through the same challenges, because they may have a different perspective, because they may have privileges that we don't understand, because they may not just, they may be a lack of education, who do you go to? Who do you have that conversation with? If I've never negotiated a salary in my life, and I don't see somebody else who may be in my position, coming from a working class background, or having to study really hard, or missing out on a grad scheme and starting an entry level role, then those conversations stay within you, and you start to lose confidence. And most importantly, then you start to feel a little bit like an imposter, mixed with, I'm actually never going to be able to leave this place because I don't know where I can go.
Yes, I mean, as you describe it like that, it feels like you can relate to how these things play out, because I guess what we all want to do is belong. We join a company because we want to have the joy and the investment in us. We want to grow, we want to learn, we want to contribute. But that sense of belonging needs us perhaps to find people that we can relate to. And is this what sophisticated organizations are trying to put in place now?
Yes, I completely think that it is. At the same time, it's because more people are getting comfortable with challenging these conversations, with putting their hand up and saying, hey, do you know what? I don't feel right about this. Why don't we try something else? A really simple example being Christmas is coming up, and the festive holidays are here. However, there's so many festive holidays or religious holidays that were missed out because of COVID. And at the same time, a lot of companies are still doing the same things, expecting different results, meaning there's been a few articles shared in the last few weeks, both on LinkedIn and kind of, via BBC and The Guardian, The Times, for example, to say virtual Christmas parties. Well, actually, doing a Christmas party, which consists of booze and Zoom at 7 p.m. on a weekday, is not inclusive, because there are caring responsibilities, because people don't binge drink, because of so many other reasons. And it's the fact that companies are maybe, on the surface saying, we're really interested in diversity inclusion, and yet you're not really setting examples or practices where you're including everyone in that conversation. Virtual Christmas parties, change them up for lunch and learns, buy everyone access to Audible or to Calm or mental health apps that are necessary, bring in a yoga instructor or meditation for the day, give everyone half day off, send them something which is accessible, not wine or alcohol, because not everyone drinks. So there's small instances like that where we can challenge the system and bring back that power and that perception of belonging, because as we've mentioned and we've had this conversation, diversity inclusion is very important because it makes you feel like you belong. You're a part of the company, the business. Your voice matters. You're represented. But most importantly, it makes you believe that you're not just another number that can be, that can be headhunted and that can be replaced.
Mm. Yes, I think the thinking about other ways of enjoying, coming together, celebrating is so important. And I think I just need to give a little encouragement to people out there. I'm going to come to your questions really soon. I think another one. I don't know. I'm being told to ask your question. I'm going to ask one more. Can you just tell me, unconscious bias, is this laziness? Is it learned behavior? Or is it something else?
Yeah. Do you know, honestly, I think it's both of the things you've mentioned combined, plus a little bit of a lack of education. Unfortunately, unconscious biases, especially when we deliver workshops and I go through these exercises, it's a simple exercise, close your eyes and imagine yourself going out to your local supermarket to buy ingredients for a dinner you're going to create. Think about the security guard that you're entering and greeting. Think about the couple that you're eavesdropping on who are arguing. Think about the family in the pasta aisle whilst you make your decision, and think about the cashier. Now, if you are to envision that scenario and take yourself out of it, most of the time, your understanding of these different characters will be based on the society around you. It will be based on your learned experiences, how you've been socialized. So if you've grown up in a multicultural society versus one which is very much the same, and the media influence. So media plays a big part in what we think, what we believe, and what we learn and what we're taught to believe. So to answer your question, unconscious biases are very much social stereotypes that we hold without even realizing. Now, the fact is that these unconscious biases are now what is problematic. A really simple example being that research has shown that those with an English or Westernized name are more likely to get a job interview than those with a name which you can't pronounce. And normally that name comes from a Pakistani background. So Pakistani applicants have to apply 60 times more. And those who come from an Afro-Black Caribbean background have to apply, if anything, 80 times more, because their names are not ones that can be pronounced. Furthermore, you have East Asians, for example, who have an English name and an East Asian name so that they aren't questioned when it comes to interview and hiring. Then we have unconscious biases around those who we feel are the best fit for the role. So, the social stereotypes that we have in respect to even sports. It's only last month or so that FIFA said they will pay their female players equally as men. That's taken how many years? Because we associate sports with something which is quite manly or kind of, quote unquote, and we associate something around marketing and PR, which is very women-led. To kind of summarize, there's a study which everyone can take, and I very much encourage. It's the Harvard Bias Implicit Study. It has about 1 million people that have taken the study. It's free online, and it basically shows you on your test results if you associate men with career and women with family, or if you have a preference for lighter skinned people versus darker skinned people. And that is eye-opening, because as forward thinking as I think I am, actually I come from a South Asian background that has a lot of anti-Blackness. There's tons of anti-Blackness and within our own community. So for me, to answer your question, it's about understanding where my unconscious biases exist, unlearning them and educating myself on how to do better. Because before I go out and preach and deliver and educate you, I need to make sure that I'm living the same practices and being very mindful that I'm by no means perfect, but I'm definitely acknowledging where I don't understand something, rather than being lazy and saying, do you know what, this is just the way I am and this is the way things are and we're not going to change that. So, unconscious biases are ignorancy, they're laziness, they are a lack of education, and also it's a lack of self-awareness, thinking that what you're doing is what you need to do and not necessarily realizing that there's a wider picture, a bigger world, and that evolution itself is existing.
In other words, to use an old phrase, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Exactly. We all have weaknesses. Very good. Well, look, that has, I'm sure, opened some really interesting questions. So let's turn to our audience and have a look here. Yes. What practical steps can organizations take to create genuinely inclusive cultures?
Yeah, great question. So there's a few things I recommend, but to keep it really short and simple, you have to listen, you have to learn, you have to action. So the first point is listen. How do you listen? Anonymous surveys. You don't even need to know who's answering them. You just need to get a consensus of how people are feeling and thinking internally, what their problem areas are and what needs to be solved. Then you learn. So you learn from either focus groups, or you learn from consultants, or you learn from those once you've identified your problem areas, and you action. So action means strategic and systematic change. It means putting budgets behind change. It means investing in a program. It means leading the organization into the light as you would in any other scenario. So it needs to have a business case behind it and take it forward. For us as individuals, I think there's three things that we can do. And I say it's very much show up, speak up, and stand up. So show up to these conversations and educate yourself and learn and also contribute. Speak up is when you're confident enough to challenge your normal, to bring a statement out. And that doesn't mean just shouting in public. It means via email, via a comment, via stats. There are so many stats that can drive the conversation if you don't feel comfortable in doing so. And then stand up means genuinely standing up for what's right and not being afraid to be slightly controversial in the way that things are moving forward. And you've seen it change things. I mean, fundamentally, during this year, you've had kids jumping on Zoom and carers being like, do you know what? It's fine. This is how we're working. That's challenging the norm. You've had companies who have invested in D&I. That's challenging the norm. But you've also had individuals who have stopped feeling like they are responsible for the change. Diversity inclusion internally is not a side of a desk job. There are a lot of individuals and diverse individuals who not take it upon them, but are giving the role and responsibility and then blamed. So the way that you can also challenge it is if you are put in that situation to take a step down and say, do you know what? This is for everyone. Everyone is accountable and responsible, and we should make a universal and united change, not just put the accountability or responsibility on one person. And so it's bringing your, the perspective back, bringing the power back, and most importantly, acknowledging what can you do? How can you bring allies into the conversation? And what can't you do? And that's completely okay as well.
It's really nicely said. Very good. Okay, we have Harini. What would the first conversation look like for an employee trying to express their concerns about unconscious bias with their employer? Very sensitive.
Such a sensitive topic. And, at any point, please, anything I say, if you have comments or questions, follow me, connect with me, and kind of ask me in a one-to-one as well. To answer this question, there's a few routes you can take. The first and foremost, your route should be your manager or those in a senior position to yourself, so you can have that conversation. But fundamentally, please don't come to it without an agenda, without kind of clear data points. The best way to have a difficult conversation is to come with patterns and trends. So if you can bring real examples, dates, times, conversations, email threads, or you know, an understanding of what the sentiment was, that really makes a big difference. The second is to go to that difficult conversation knowing what you want to get out of this meeting. So it's not just throw it to your senior stakeholder and say, go and fix it. It's, I feel this way, or I believe this way because of this comment or this situation. This is what I would like as an outcome, as a solution. And lastly, it's to build and co-create that solution together. I think often what we do as individuals is we also place a lot of these changes in the hands of HR and our managers, thinking that they have the resources, but often they don't have the perspective because they haven't suffered or they haven't actually been a victim to it. The other route is to definitely go down to HR. I've done that in my past, is where I've taken notes and examples of what's been said. I've put in an email thread and I've sent it to HR and said, look, this is the problem. And you know, these are the biases that I'm experiencing, and this is what I suggest we can do at the back of it, and let them deal with it. The third is a trade union. There are other ways, of course. We've spoken about anonymous surveys, focus groups, community forums. But the other thing I would like to say is, you know, at some point we also need to know when to stop. Unfortunately, we talk a lot about raising conversations and we don't think about the toxic element or the impact it's having on our mental health. So if something isn't being done and it's not being done in the way that it should, and you've been suffering for a very long time, then you also have to consider, is that the place you want to be? And is that the company you want to be surrounded by? And is that the type of association that you want on your CV? Mm-hmm. And hopefully those are actionable steps that I've given, and also a bit of mindset.
Yeah, because I think through all our careers, there are words said to us that really hurt. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it just happens and it's a one-off. Mm-hmm. I remember someone once saying to me that I was going to be phased out. And I remember thinking, no, I stay or I go, but I don't get phased out. But I remember how much it hurt. And I think learning to use that anger for positive career momentum can also help. You mm-hmm. know, a little bit of anger goes a long way for, you know, driving forwards with ambition, and, you know, I will show them that I am worthy of whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, this is genuinely why I'm in this position today, is because, you know, I've had everything said to me, like, leave your moods at home, basically on my personality and the energy I have. Two, you know, you're not going to thrive in tech because you're not technical, all the way to, actually, it's okay if we got your name wrong for 6 weeks. Because when I reported that, the individual didn't get told off. It was myself who got called aggressive. It was myself who got called, actually, that was very aggressive of you. And I was like, this is my identity. It's what makes me. I didn't ask to be called Sonya when I was born. It's what I've known for 27, 28 years. And exactly to your point, you know, if something is constant, then think about, is that the time for your career to change, for you to pivot, for you to start a different communication route? If something is happening initially and it's first, especially if you're in a small business, that's perfect, because you can have that discussion there and then, and you can build really strong foundations. I always use the analogy that you want to build a strong foundation for your house before you invite people for tea.
Yes. Analogy. Okay, I'm just trying to get one more question in here, Sonya, because I know there are a lot out there. How can we push forward D&I initiatives during the pandemic?
Yeah, great question. The first and most important thing I would like to say is, let's not try and go back to the old normal, because clearly that wasn't working for us. It just wasn't functioning. So there's a few things that the pandemic has helped us embed, which we should carry on. One is flexible working and the opportunity to work from home. So carry this on, make sure that even if we go back to work, your employers are very much aware that you can work from home and that you are productive. The second is normalizing kids running around and sound in the background and working from your bed. Unfortunately, we exist in a world that is a reality. Something that I absolutely love about the female lead is, and goes into my next point, is also acknowledging that there is fundamentally a tech poverty and a digital skills poverty that does exist. So making sure that your businesses on their onboarding plans and their cultural plans really are making the most of onboarding stakeholders and new colleagues into how to be digitally savvy and how to be represent themselves online. And lastly, and most importantly, is to consider diversity inclusion not as a tick box, but as a strategic, systematic change that is just a core part of how you function, and very much championing the fact that not only do you need budgets behind this, but you need to bring people in who are experts, who have lived experiences, and be that through kind of monthly lunch and learns, or be that through a consultant that you're taking on board for a longer period of time. It's just making sure that we don't stop the conversation here and now, and we carry on knowing, and most importantly knowing, that if the pandemic has taught us anything, is that our voice is so important. It's so important to raise, to share, to learn, to educate, and to communicate. Communication, empathy, and fundamentally these kind of softer skills are the skills of the future. So we should embrace them now and know that what we have to say really, really, really does matter.
I love that. I love our voice matters and don't stop the conversation. What really powerful words. That is beautifully said. Thank you so much. So we will make sure that people know how to connect to you, Sonya. I just need to mention that our next LinkedIn Live audience out there is the 19th of, no, it can't be the 19th of November. Well, it's next Thursday, whenever that is. And we will be meeting Amy Yip, and she's talking to us about building mental fitness, shifting from surviving to thriving, which I think fits very nicely with what you've just said. So until then, my very warm thanks, Sonya. It's been a pleasure having you, and thank you for sharing what you've learned and what you've developed going forward into what I know will be a really exciting career for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn. My socials are at Sonya Barlow UK, and I really look forward to working with you again.
Wonderful. Thank you.